Hi, my name's Magnus, and I was 8 months pregnant when my parents asked me to cook Thanksgiving dinner for 30 guests. No help, no apology, just expectation. I was limping by dessert. They said it builds character. But then, someone at the table stood up and called them monsters. And in that moment, something inside me cracked open. Want to know what I did next? The smell of onions clung to everything, my hands, my clothes, even my hair. Steam fogged the kitchen window, turning my reflection into a ghost. Tired eyes, damp bangs, and a belly that made even standing feel like a feat. Outside, spring sunlight bathed the backyard in gold, but inside, everything felt thick and heavy, like even the walls were pressing in. I was 8 months pregnant, standing over a pot of stew big enough to feed 30 people. My back ached, my fingers cramped from stirring. Every shift of weight sent lightning up my spine, and all I could think was, this wasn't even my house. Just a borrowed space my parents let me use until I got back on my feet. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was Mom. "Hurry," she snapped before I could say hello. "People are arriving." I wanted to scream. I've been hurrying for hours. My feet were swollen. My shirt stuck to my skin. But instead, I swallowed it down. "Okay, Mom." She hung up. The kitchen was a mess of bubbling pots and dishes half-washed. Once, this space had meant home. Now, it felt like a job I couldn't quit. I caught myself in the microwave door, my shoulders slumped, my eyes hollow. I looked more like a tired employee than a daughter. The door swung open. Mom entered, trailing citrus perfume and entitlement. Her dress was immaculate, her wine glass full, her smile tight. "Don't forget your father's roast," she said, nodding toward the oven like a supervisor giving instructions. "That's everyone's favorite." I opened my mouth, but she was already gone, her heels tapping across the tile like punctuation. Final. Dismissive. I turned back to the stove and stirred the sauce. My arms ached. I remembered when she used to cup my face and say, "You've always been the strong one, Magnus." Somewhere along the way, that phrase twisted into, "You can handle it." It stopped sounding like love. It started sounding like abandonment. By noon, the house was loud. Laughter, clinking glasses, music someone thought was festive. Through the doorway, I saw guests arriving. Hugs, kisses, loud greetings. It looked like something out of a Hallmark commercial. And in that commercial, I was just the person behind the curtain, keeping it all running. Callista floated through the living room, glittering like she owned the air. Her dress sparkled. Her voice carried. She smiled with every tooth. I caught her eye once. She looked right through me. I stirred harder. No one came in. No one offered help. A year ago, I had a life, a husband, a future. Then a truck ran a red light, and I became a widow in a blink. People told me, "You're lucky you have family." I suppose they meant the kind that gave me a roof and a list of chores as rent. I heard Dad laughing, his easy, bellowing laugh. Mom's voice chimed in, sweet as syrup. From the kitchen, I could hear everything. But I wasn't part of it. "You okay in there?" a voice called, not with concern, but like someone checking a delivery status. "Fine," I lied. My voice was paper thin. The oven timer beeped. I bent down, wincing as pain stabbed through my lower back. The roast was golden, rosemary and garlic filling the air. I set it down and exhaled. Even breathing took effort. "To family!" Callista's voice rang from the living room, clear and smug. I nearly laughed. Family. The word felt like a cruel joke. If I walked out there now, Mom would shoot me that brittle smile and say, "Magnus, clean yourself up. You'll scare them." So I stayed in the kitchen, sweaty, exhausted, invisible. My hand shook as I wiped the counter. The microwave reflection stared back at me. I looked older than 33. Maybe grief aged me, or maybe it was the weight of living under this roof, unseen. Mom peeked back in. "Magnus, breadbasket? Now, they're starving." I nodded. She didn't notice the tremor in my hands. She never did. Once she left, I whispered to no one. They'd starve faster if I stopped. The sound startled me. There was something sharp in my voice, something dangerous, something mine. The baby kicked. I placed my hand on my stomach. "It's okay," I murmured. "We'll get through this." That little movement was the only tenderness I'd felt all day. It gave me strength I didn't know I still had. The hours crawled, my back screamed. Dishes piled. The stew simmered low and slow. Outside the kitchen, the world sparkled. Laughter, stories, clinking forks. But I wasn't part of it. I was the backdrop, the afterthought. I turned off the stove. The roast shimmered. The sauces were perfect. The kitchen smelled like effort, like exhaustion, like someone trying so hard to be enough and always falling short. The refrigerator hummed. Shadows stretched across the floor as the sun slipped lower. Everything in this house, every sound, every silence, felt like a reminder that I was just convenient help. The timer beeped again. I wiped my hands, looked around. I'd done it all. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. Then the front door swung open. "Magnus!" Callista's voice sliced through the air. "They want food now!" Not a request. An order. For 1 second, everything froze. Even the hum of the fridge stopped. I stood tall. I wiped my palms on the apron. And something inside me, something small, quiet, and long ignored, stirred. The air still carried the smell of roast and sweat when I heard Callista's voice again, closer this time. The echo of her heels clicked down the hallway like tiny hammers hitting my spine. I had just taken off my apron, hoping for a brief breath before dinner, when she appeared in the doorway holding a clipboard. Of all things, a clipboard. "So," she said, all sugar and superiority, "I made a list of what everyone likes. It's all different. I told them you'd make it happen." She handed me the sheet as if it were an honor, not a demand. I scanned the paper. Gluten-free, dairy-free, low-carb, no onions, extra onions, spicy, not spicy. 30 people, 30 preferences. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "Callista," I said, my voice coming out softer than I wanted, "there's already enough food for everyone." She tilted her head, feigning sympathy. "Oh, but you know how guests are. They're used to a little customization. And you're so good in the kitchen, Magnus." "You've always had that touch." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It never did. I wanted to tear that list in half, but instead, I folded it neatly and placed it on the counter beside the cutting board. I gripped the counter edge until my knuckles whitened. From behind her, Mom's voice floated in, calm, polished, detached. "Callista, make sure she doesn't forget your father's wine sauce. The guests adore that." Mom stepped into view then, holding her ever-present glass of Chardonnay. "Magnus," she said, "this will be good for you. Staying active is healthy for the baby." Something inside me cracked, just a hairline fracture. Healthy for the baby. As if exhaustion were exercise, as if servitude were therapy. I wanted to tell her that standing on swollen feet for 6 hours wasn't doctor recommended. I wanted to remind her I was 8 months pregnant, not a sous chef. But she was already gone, her perfume lingering longer than her presence. Callista leaned against the fridge, studying her manicure. "I mean," she said casually, "you're not working right now, right? You've got the time." There it was, the dagger she always delivered with a smile. I didn't answer. I just reached for the pan again. The sound of sizzling oil filled the silence that followed. The sky outside had turned orange, the kind of sunset that would have been beautiful if it weren't trapped behind this house. The noise from the dining room grew louder. Laughter, clinking glasses, a faint playlist of classic hits. The contrast was maddening. I turned to grab the serving tray, and that's when it happened. A sudden, sharp sting shot through my foot. I froze. For a second, I didn't understand what I'd stepped on. Then I saw it, a thin shard of glass glinting beneath the counter. Maybe it had fallen from someone's wine glass earlier. Maybe no one cared to clean it up. Pain pulsed up my leg. I gasped and caught myself on the counter before falling. My body tensed protectively around my stomach. I could feel warm blood sliding between my toes, sticking to the tile. Callista glanced down, eyebrows barely twitching. "Oh, be careful," she said lightly, then went back to scrolling her phone. Mom looked up from the doorway where she'd returned, saw the blood, and sighed as if I'd spilled milk. "Don't make a scene, Magnus. The guests can hear you." Her words landed heavier than the glass ever could. I pressed a paper towel against my foot, feeling the blood soak through instantly. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice shaking. "It's fine." "Good," Mom replied, already turning away. "Just hurry up with the side dishes. The bread's getting cold." The moment she left, the kitchen seemed to shrink. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint jazz music outside, it all blurred into one endless noise. I crouched down, carefully picking up the glass pieces one by one, wrapping them in a napkin like tiny secrets. The floor beneath me was spotted with red. I wiped it up with another towel. No one would ever know. No one ever did. My foot throbbed with every heartbeat, but I forced myself upright. I had food to serve, apparently. I limped toward the counter, steadying myself on the wall. My reflection in the microwave caught my eye again. Sweat plastered to my temples, eyes dull, lips pressed into a line. A woman fading in plain sight. I could hear Callista's laughter spilling in from the other room. She had that bright, performative laugh that always drew attention. It used to charm people. Now it grated like sandpaper. The baby kicked again. It wasn't a gentle nudge this time. It felt sharp, urgent, like it wanted me to react. Maybe it was just instinct, but I whispered, I know. My voice cracked. And then, like a cruel twist from the universe, the smell of coffee hit me. Someone must have brewed a pot for the guests. It dragged me back, to that morning a year ago, when everything changed. I saw it all again. The knock at the door, the uniformed officer, the words that didn't make sense. There's been an accident. The mug of coffee on the table, still half full. I never drank coffee again after that day. Couldn't stand the scent of it. That night, no one stayed with me, not even Mom. She said, "You need time to grieve alone." Callista texted a heart emoji. That was her version of comfort. I came back to the present, blinking hard, gripping the counter as if it could anchor me to now. The cut on my foot pulsed, and for a split second, I thought I might pass out. But I didn't. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. The timer beeped again. I plated the dishes, 1, 2, 3, each motion mechanical. The roast, the sauce, the vegetables perfectly arranged. It looked flawless. On the surface, everything did, but beneath it, something was boiling. I caught my reflection again in the metal of the oven door. My cheeks were flushed, eyes glassy. For a moment, I didn't look tired. I looked angry, really angry. Maybe they weren't ignoring me. Maybe this was the plan all along, to keep me small, quiet, and useful. Callista breezed back in, her voice bright with that same casual cruelty. "Magnus, the guests are asking about their food. You know, people are starting to get annoyed." The words rolled off her tongue like a threat dressed as a warning. She didn't even look at me as she turned and called out toward the dining room, "Tell Magnus to hurry up!" A voice from the other room joined in, sharp and impatient. "Yeah, what's taking so long back there?" I could feel the heat crawling up my neck, the humiliation thick as smoke. My hands trembled on the counter, not from exhaustion anymore, but from something rawer, something hotter. For the first time, I didn't lower my gaze. I looked straight at Callista as she adjusted her earrings in the reflection of the microwave. She caught my eye and smirked, unaware that the flicker inside me was no longer small. Callista's smirk clung to my thoughts like a stain as I stepped into the dining room. The noise washed over me, polished laughter, the delicate chime of glass against glass, silverware tapping plates like applause meant for everyone but me. The roast platter I held dug into my palms, heavier than it should have been. My foot throbbed with each step, the bandaged cut pulsing in protest, but I forced my face into a mask of calm. The chandelier's light seemed brighter than usual, reflecting off every crystal glass and polished fork, magnifying every imperfection. I walked around the table and placed the roast at the center like a ghost, unnoticed, unacknowledged. Not one glance in my direction. I reached to pour wine into a man's glass. He nodded faintly, not to me, but to Callista, who was mid-story, her fork waving with exaggerated charm. Mom sat beside her, laughing too loudly, as if trying to prove she was still young, still relevant, still in on the joke. Callista's voice carried like perfume, light, sweet, and cloying. You all know how particular I am. Magnus helped with the details. She's always been accommodating. A few guests chuckled. I set the salad in front of her with trembling hands. Still, no one noticed. Then came the moment that broke something in me. A man I didn't recognize, one of Dad's old colleagues maybe, leaned over to his dinner partner and asked, loud enough for the whole table, "Wait, so who is she exactly? The maid?" A silence cut through the room. Forks paused mid-air. I froze, breath caught in my chest. Callista laughed. "Oh, she's family," she said lightly, waving a hand as if I were a smudge on the furniture. "Just kind of part of the background these days." Laughter followed. Real laughter this time. Warm, entertained, cruel. Someone muttered, "That's awful," but smiled anyway. I felt my face flush, my hands curled tightly around the empty wine bottle I was holding. I reached for a plate and cleared it, though it wasn't finished, because I needed to move, to do something. As I leaned across the table, Callista leaned in too. Her breath smelled of wine and wealth. "You should be grateful," she whispered. "Most people like you would be on the street." That sentence landed harder than any slap. I turned toward her, locking eyes. For a brief second, her smirk faltered. That flicker of uncertainty in her gaze was enough. I walked to the kitchen in silence, footsteps slow, precise. Inside, the air was cooler. I set the plate down, gripping the edge of the counter, trying to steady the tremble in my fingers. Her words echoed inside me. "People like you. Be grateful." I closed my eyes. The kitchen felt like a sanctuary, even surrounded by dishes and dirty glasses. My back pressed against the cold pantry wall, and I breathed in slowly. I thought of the last time I'd been in this room in a white dress, my wedding day. Callista had stood next to me in pink satin, smiling as she raised her glass. "To my beautiful baby sister," she had said, "you deserve the world." I'd believed her then. Now her voice sliced through the past with ease. All the love had been a mask. And I had worn mine too, smiling through bruises I didn't know were forming. The door creaked. Mom entered without glancing at me, holding out her wine glass. "They're almost out of bread," she said. "And the tiramisu's still in the fridge, right?" "Yes," I answered. "Good girl," she said, already turning away. The words cut deeper than she knew. Good girl. Like I was a dog waiting for approval. I didn't stop the tears this time. They slipped quietly down my cheeks. Not dramatic, not sobbing, just sorrow expressed the only way it could now, silently. I placed a hand on my belly. The baby shifted inside me, a soft flutter like hope. "This baby," I whispered, "will never feel this kind of silence." The vow rang in my chest. Outside, Callista's voice rang out again. "Magnus, more wine!" The old commands, the old tone, the hierarchy cemented since we were children. Was I always the one serving? I picked up the wine bottle and walked back in. As I entered, the laughter resumed. The same man who had asked if I was the maid now raised his glass toward Callista like she were royalty. I placed the wine on the table without a word. No one looked up. I was invisible again, save for one person, Dad. His eyes met mine, just for a second. He looked tired, not guilty, not apologetic, just exhausted, like a man who'd stood by long enough to pretend he wasn't part of the cruelty. It didn't soften anything, it only made the cold worse. Callista raised her glass. "To family," she declared. "To family," they echoed. I watched from behind. 30 people. Not one saw me. And yet, I felt something inside me shift, a tremor, a whisper of defiance. I turned. Walked to the kitchen once more. As I left, I heard someone mutter, half joking, "You're not the main character today, Magnus." And like always, no one corrected them. The echo of their laughter still hung in the air as I climbed the stairs. The house had gone quiet after dinner, but my mind hadn't. The words, "You're not the main character today," played on a loop, each repetition sinking deeper until it almost became part of the air I breathed. I placed a hand on my lower back and pulled myself up step by step, feeling the ache in my swollen feet, the dull throb in my injured one. Halfway up, I muttered to myself, I didn't know I had to audition. The sound was barely a whisper, but it made me feel lighter, like an invisible thread of sarcasm keeping me from breaking. The hallway upstairs was dim, lit only by the muted glow of a small lamp near the end. The guest room door stood open, waiting for me like a silent witness. It wasn't really my room, it never had that feeling, just a temporary space with beige walls and a faint scent of lavender detergent, a place for someone who didn't belong but wasn't gone yet. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it for a moment. My reflection stared back from the mirror above the dresser. Tired eyes, hair escaping the messy bun, shoulders slumped. I looked like a woman rehearsing for invisibility. The room felt too clean, too organized. A neatly folded blanket, a single pillow, no photographs, not even the smallest trace of personality. It wasn't a home. It was storage. I changed into an old t-shirt that hung loosely over my belly and sat by the window. The air outside had cooled. Crickets chirped faintly from somewhere beyond the fence. Downstairs, I could still hear muffled voices, the clatter of dishes being loaded into the dishwasher, Callista's laugh echoing faintly through the vents. Even when she was out of sight, she occupied the room. A soft knock came at the door. I turned my head slowly. It was Mom. She opened the door halfway but didn't step in. Her silhouette filled the doorway, her expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought she might apologize, or at least say something human, but she didn't. She just stared at me, eyes flickering briefly toward my stomach, then around the spotless room. "You should get some rest," she said finally, her tone flat, almost like an instruction. "I will," I replied. She hesitated, only for a second, then nodded and closed the door without another word. The silence that followed felt heavier than her presence. I sat there for a long time, staring at the wall, at the faint line where the paint didn't quite match, the kind of imperfection no one else would notice but me, the kind that made me feel human again. Eventually, I reached for my phone. The screen lit up my face, harsh in the dim light. I opened YouTube without thinking, my thumb moving automatically. My search history was filled with recipes, prenatal yoga, lullaby playlists. But this time, I typed something different. Giving birth alone. Mental preparation. A video popped up, an American woman sitting cross-legged in her living room, talking softly into the camera. Her voice was calm, measured, and kind. "You're stronger than anyone gives you credit for," she said. "When you're alone, it doesn't mean you're weak. It means you've survived what others couldn't." Something in me cracked open. I pressed my palm against my belly, feeling the baby shift beneath my skin. A gentle movement, as if it understood. The video kept playing. "You don't need an audience to be brave," the woman said. "You just need a reason." I smiled faintly. I had a reason. Sleeping inside me. As her voice faded into a guided breathing exercise, my thoughts drifted back, unbidden, to a year earlier. The hospital room. The grainy black and white screen. The technician pointing to a flicker on the monitor. "That's the heartbeat," she'd said. I remembered crying, not because I was overwhelmed, but because I'd been alone. No one came with me that day. Mom said she was busy with errands. Callista texted me a selfie from a cafe with the caption, "Good luck, sis." After the appointment, I'd sat in my car for nearly an hour, staring at the ultrasound photo, my heart torn between joy and emptiness. I'd promised myself then, I will never feel this alone again. Yet here I was, 1 year later, sitting in a borrowed room, watching a stranger on a screen teach me how to survive my own motherhood. I opened the Notes app on my phone. My fingers hovered for a moment before I started typing. Emergency plan, hospital route, bag checklist, pediatrician options. I paused, staring at the next line. Automatically, I started to type, call family. But then I stopped. I watched the words blink on the screen, hollow and meaningless. Slowly, I erased them. Instead, I typed, call Uber. A A quiet laugh escaped me. Not the bitter kind, just something dry and real. It felt strange to laugh at all. I could still hear faint noises downstairs, cutlery clinking, someone turning off lights, the sounds of people living their lives uninterrupted. I leaned back against the headboard, resting one hand on my stomach. "It's just us," I whispered. "And that's okay." The baby moved again, a gentle flutter that made my chest ache with both love and grief. I scrolled back to the video. The woman on screen was talking about breathing through fear, about picturing a future beyond pain. I followed along, inhaling slowly through my nose, exhaling through my mouth. For the first time in weeks, my heartbeat started to slow. The air felt clearer. I opened the small nightstand drawer beside me. Inside was the ultrasound photo, folded and worn at the edges. I hadn't looked at it in months. I unfolded it now and traced the outline of the tiny shape on the paper. "We've already made it this far," I said softly. "We'll make it the rest of the way." The phone buzzed suddenly, startling me. The video paused. The screen lit up with a soft glow. For a second, I thought it was Callista again, or Mom checking in with another command disguised as concern. But it wasn't. The notification was from an unfamiliar number. Document request, confirmed, custody family rights packet. I stared at it, frozen. The legal office I'd contacted weeks ago, after another night like this one. I'd forgotten I'd even filled out the form. The timing felt like more than coincidence. I set the phone down on my lap, staring out the window. The moon hung low over the neighborhood, silver light spilling across the rooftops. Somewhere below, I could hear the faint hum of the dishwasher. Everything in the house seemed peaceful, except me. But for the first time, that peace didn't belong to them anymore. It belonged to me. I pressed the lock button on my phone, letting the screen go dark. The reflection staring back at me wasn't the same woman who'd cooked dinner for 30 people earlier that day. It was someone new, someone who was done waiting to be chosen. "They don't see me," I whispered, my voice steady. "But I see me now." The night deepened quietly around the house, the kind of silence that feels deliberate, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Downstairs, the dishwasher had stopped humming, leaving only the faint ticking of the kitchen clock somewhere below. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the shadows cast by the moonlight slipping through the blinds. My phone rested beside me, dark now, its earlier message still echoing in my mind. My hands felt restless. I reached for the drawer of the small nightstand. Inside were papers I hadn't touched in months, doctor's notes, utility bills, receipts from my husband's funeral. But tucked beneath them was something else. An envelope. It was sealed, slightly yellowed at the edges, with my name written across the front in his handwriting. "For when you feel lost." My breath caught. My thumb traced the letters as if I could feel his warmth through the ink. For a long moment, I just held it there, afraid to open it. Afraid of what it might stir. But then, I tore it open. The paper inside was folded neatly, the familiar scrawl bringing back every memory of his late-night notes, the ones he used to leave on the fridge before heading to work. "You were always the brightest in every room. Never shrink for anyone, not even family. You are the compass and the map. Don't let anyone dim your light." The words blurred through the tears filling my eyes. My chest tightened. He'd written this years ago, maybe sensing something I didn't. Maybe he knew I'd need these words someday, when the people who claimed to love me became the ones who broke me down. I read it again, slower this time, letting each sentence sink in like a steady heartbeat. He used to hold my face between his hands when life got hard and whisper, "They don't deserve you." He'd say it half-jokingly, but there was always a trace of something real beneath it, some quiet understanding that maybe my kindness was too often mistaken for compliance. He used to tell me, "You're building something greater, even if they don't see it yet." That line hit me hardest now. It wasn't just reassurance anymore. It was prophecy. The letter slipped from my fingers and fell onto my lap. I stared at it until the words began to fade in the dim light, then reached for the lamp on the bedside table and turned it off. The room was instantly darker, but I felt something else glowing quietly inside me. A faint, steady spark. I picked up my laptop from the floor, its case scuffed and old, but still reliable. It had been weeks since I'd opened it. The screen blinked awake, the familiar hum of the fan cutting through the quiet. I hesitated, then opened my email. I scrolled through the inbox, dozens of unread messages, most of them from relatives forwarding prayer chains or inspirational quotes they didn't live by. Then I saw it, an old thread labeled Family Updates. I clicked it. There it was. Callista's voice in text form, just as sharp and manipulative as it was in person. If she's going to stay with them, she needs structure, she'd written. She's lost her husband, yes, but she can't just sit around. Maybe if she helps out more, it'll teach her responsibility. Vera had replied, "You're right. She's lucky to have this roof over her head." Lucky. The words stung even now. I kept scrolling, reading message after message, each one layering insult over expectation. They'd planned it all. The cooking, the cleaning, the endless chores that had turned into servitude, all under the guise of helping me heal. I opened a new email. My pulse quickened, but my hands were steady. 2. Legal office at countylaw.org. Subject: family coercion, emotional neglect. Evidence. I started typing. Dear Ms. Bennett, I am writing to follow up regarding my prior inquiry about custody and independent housing support. Attached are family correspondence emails that document coercive and emotionally harmful dynamics. I believe this environment is unsafe for both me and my unborn child. I would like clarity regarding custody protection and temporary relocation options. I attached the screenshots and sat there for a few seconds, reading the message over. It wasn't angry, it was factual, calm, clear. Exactly what he'd taught me to be. Before I could second-guess myself, I hit send. The sound of the whoosh filled the room, a quiet liberation. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the screen. The cursor blinked in the empty inbox, almost like it was breathing with me. Then I reached for the letter again, smoothing its edges, placing it carefully beneath my pillow. The baby kicked once, a soft push from within. I rested my hand over my stomach and smiled through the remnants of tears. "I hear you," I whispered. "And I'm ready now." The clock on the nightstand read 1:42 a.m. The house below was silent. The air conditioner hummed faintly through the vents, carrying with it the smell of dish soap and something faintly metallic, maybe the scent of the old pipes. I lay back, staring at the ceiling, my mind tracing the words from his letter again and again. Never shrink for anyone. The sentence became a rhythm, almost like a lullaby, and then the laptop chimed. I sat up quickly, my pulse skipping. On the corner of the screen, the email icon glowed softly. A new notification. Your message has been read. Someone on the other end, someone who could help, had seen it. It felt like an invisible thread had just been tied between me and a future I could actually reach. I exhaled, long and slow, then closed the laptop. The sound of the latch clicking shut was final, grounding. The moonlight had shifted slightly, spilling across the floor, glinting off the silver handle of the drawer. I could almost imagine his hand there, steady, reassuring, reminding me that even in the quietest moments, I wasn't truly alone. For the first time in a long while, I didn't dread the morning. I wasn't waiting for permission or approval. The air felt lighter, cleaner. Somewhere down the hall, a floorboard creaked. I froze. A soft knock came at the door. Gentle, hesitant. I turned my head toward it. "Magnus?" It was Lumen's voice. Small, uncertain. I hesitated, then said, "Yeah?" A pause. Then, almost a whisper. "I think you should hear something I recorded." The words lingered in the dark like an approaching storm. I didn't move at first. My room was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your skin. Lumen's voice still echoed behind the door, faint but trembling. My heart wasn't racing, but every part of me felt coiled, alert, as if I already knew what was about to change. "Come in," I said, barely louder than a whisper. The door opened slowly. Lumen stepped in, barefoot, her oversized sweatshirt hanging loosely on her frame. Her eyes flicked nervously down the hallway before she shut the door behind her. I didn't want them to hear me, she whispered. She clutched her phone tightly, the faint blue light reflecting off her fingers. Her face was pale. She looked younger than I remembered. What is it? I asked. She hesitated, chewing her bottom lip like she did when we were kids, and she broke something. Then she said, I didn't know what they were saying about you. Not until yesterday. I waited. She unlocked her phone and tapped a file. I recorded this by accident. I was getting water in the kitchen. They didn't know I was there. She handed me the phone. I pressed play. The recording was fuzzy at first, clinking glasses, faint laughter. Then my mother's voice came through, sharp and clear. Let her cook, Vera said. It's better than letting her feel important. Callista's laughter followed, light and cruel. Exactly. No need to feed her ego while she's feeding us. Silence. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I just handed the phone back. Send it to me, I said. Lumen nodded quickly, tears brimming. I didn't know it was like this. I didn't know it was this bad. I met her eyes. You know now. She looked down. What are you going to do? I turned toward the window. The first hint of dawn was breaking. What I should have done long ago. When she left, the birds had just begun to sing. I sat in the dim light and waited for the vibration of my phone. The file arrived. I saved it and sent it to one person. Eris. She wasn't family, just a family friend who came out of politeness, but she had looked at me last night when no one else would. Her eyes had held something like empathy. She had seen me, no message, just the file. I pressed send. Later that morning, I went downstairs. The dining room had been reset for brunch. Sunlight filtered in through the curtains. Everything looked picture perfect. The smell of fresh coffee lingered, masking something sour beneath it. Vera was arranging fruit bowls. Callista was already seated, flawless as ever, tapping away at her phone like the night before had been a dream. Good morning, Vera said, her tone overly cheerful. Magnus, dear, could you? No, Mom, I said calmly. I'm fine right here. She blinked, caught off guard. Well, suit yourself. Callista didn't look up. Someone's touchy, she muttered. I ignored her and sat down. I wasn't tense. I didn't need to be. My part was done. The first 15 minutes passed in strained normalcy. Small talk, staged laughter, guests trying not to look at me too long, waiting for me to break. Then Eris spoke. Before we eat, she said clearly, I want to share something. The room froze. Callista's cup stopped mid-sip. Vera's hand, holding a spoon, paused above a bowl. Eris took her time. She scrolled on her phone, then hit play. The recording began. Let her cook. It's better than letting her feel important. Exactly. No need to feed her ego while she's feeding us. The words shattered the air. Vera gasped. What? What is that? Eris looked up. Your voice. Color drained from Vera's face. Callista's fork dropped with a clatter. That's private, Callista snapped. You're twisting it. It means nothing. It meant everything, Eris said, nodding at me. Everyone looked at me. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Then Eris continued. Her voice was steady as she read from her screen. This family forced a pregnant woman to cook for 30 people. This is emotional abuse. They are monsters. It was my email, sent to the legal office. Eris had forwarded it back to herself. Now she was reading it aloud, so no one could pretend anymore. A woman at the table gasped. You had her working all day? At 8 months pregnant? Someone else whispered, That's cruel. Vera's voice cracked. Magnus, how could you… Tell the truth? I said softly. It was overdue. Callista pushed back in her chair. You just love playing the victim, don't you? I picked up my orange juice and sipped it slowly. No, I just stopped volunteering to be your servant. Silence. Callista forced a laugh. Don't be ridiculous. People are overreacting. But no one laughed. Eris stood. You can pretend all you want, but what's been said has been heard. Lumen, at the far end, looked down at her lap. It's true, she whispered. I was there. Everything stopped. Vera's mouth opened, but no sound came. Callista turned pale. Lumen, shut up! But Lumen didn't. She just stared at her hands. I watched the scene unfold. No yelling, no chaos, just truth. And finally, people were listening. Eris poured another cup of coffee. Would you like some? She asked me gently. Yes, I said. She smiled, just a little. The kind of smile that says you've already won. She handed me the cup. The light in the room felt different, brighter, lighter, and then a chair scraped. My father, Aldrich, stood. He hadn't spoken all morning, hadn't looked at anyone. Now he looked from Vera to Callista to me. I held his gaze. For a moment, it seemed like he might finally speak, but he didn't. He turned and walked out, without a single word. The door hadn't even closed behind Aldrich when the room seemed to shift. Not physically, but in atmosphere. The clinking of silverware halted mid-motion. Voices died, and the once buzzing brunch fell into an unnatural, heavy stillness. The midday sun poured in through the tall windows, casting long streaks of light across the table. But even the warmth felt false, distant, like it belonged to another house, another moment. I didn't move. My hands stayed folded in my lap, but I could feel the faint tremble in my fingers. My knuckles pressed so tightly against the linen napkin that it wrinkled like dry paper. No one dared to speak first, not even Callista, who always had something clever to say. Silence filled the space he left behind, stretching so taut it hummed in my ears. Vera, always the peacemaker, was the first to act. She stood slowly, gathering plates with mechanical precision, her every move too practiced. She didn't look at anyone as she worked. "He's just tired," she said to the room, her voice loud in the hush, as if volume alone could override discomfort. But no one answered, no one agreed. Callista, still seated at the head of the table like a queen whose crown had begun to slip, forced a grin. She raised her glass, filled with untouched wine, and declared with strained brightness, "Families argue. That's just brunch, not Broadway." Her laugh rang out, brittle and misplaced, like glass cracking in a quiet room. She looked around for someone, anyone, to join her in the performance. No one did. The silence returned, deeper, unyielding. From across the table, a guest leaned toward their partner and whispered, not quietly enough, "Wasn't she the one who made her cook all of this?" My pulse thudded in my ears, but I didn't flinch, I didn't turn away or look down. For the first time in years, I met Callista's eyes and didn't immediately look for a corner to shrink into. I was done shrinking. Then I felt movement beside me. Lumen, gentle, observant Lumen, quietly dragged her chair closer to mine. The sound of her chair legs against the tile echoed too loudly, slicing the silence. She didn't say a word, but she didn't need to. Her presence was an anchor. Her choice was visible. She had chosen to sit beside me. That, in this family, was everything. Vera was still clinging to the old rituals. She reached for a breadbasket, trying to conjure normalcy. "Let's just relax," she offered weakly. "Magnus, can you pass the—" Her voice cracked. The illusion was breaking. Across the table, Eris stood abruptly. She didn't gather her things with drama or make a scene, but her voice was calm and clear, unwavering. "I'm sorry. I can't stay in a room where silence speaks louder than truth." She looked directly at Callista, and then, without another word, she walked out. Two other guests, ones I barely knew but who had watched everything unfold with two bright eyes, followed her, murmuring quiet apologies and grabbing their coats. Their absence felt like a tide going out. The room shrank. So did Callista. Her cheeks were tinged with red now, and she leaned over to Vera in a half-whisper, as if the exits could be reversed by command. "She can't just leave," she hissed, but still no one responded. Aldrich's chair, now empty, stared at us all like a ghost. It wasn't just a missing person. It was a missing authority. For years, he had controlled the narrative by saying almost nothing. His power wasn't in his voice, but in the way others bent themselves to fit the silence he left behind. And now that silence turned on them. What remained at this table wasn't a family. It was the crumbling set of a play, the props all askew, the actors unsure whether to keep performing or walk off stage. I leaned forward slowly, letting the air gather around my next words like a tide pulling back before a wave. He saw me. My voice was soft but deliberate, cutting through the silence like a bell. Everyone stilled. The weight of the words wasn't in their volume, but in their truth. Callista blinked, as if unsure what she'd heard. Her fingers tightened around her wine glass, and she raised it again, blindly following the only pattern she knew. "Let's just move on," she whispered. But there was no moving on, not anymore. I stood, not quickly, not dramatically. I simply stood, and the weight of 100 past humiliations slipped off my shoulders. Every eye turned to me, some curious, others ashamed. A few, like lumens, were proud. I placed my napkin on the table with care, as if that quiet act meant something. Then I turned and walked toward the hallway, not rushing. Each step felt intentional, final. When I reached the console by the door, I placed a small white envelope atop it, my handwriting clear, unwavering. For everyone still pretending. I didn't look back, because some silences aren't passive, some are statements, and mine had finally been heard. The morning light crept through the curtains, soft and reluctant, as though it too was unsure whether to intrude. I lay still beneath the quilt, eyes tracing the ceiling, heart steady for the first time in days. Outside, a wind stirred the branches just beyond the window, whispering its own quiet farewell to something that had already passed. It was my house again, mine, not theirs. And the silence. It no longer screamed. It just existed. Peacefully. On the hallway console sat the envelope I had placed before dawn, trembling slightly in the draft from a cracked window. It hadn't moved. No one had touched it. The weight of its contents was far heavier than paper alone. Closure, boundary, rebuke. A note not for reconciliation, but for release. I moved slowly, wincing slightly at the soreness in my back and the sharp tenderness in my heel. But even the aches felt changed, as if they belonged to someone finally stepping down from a role she'd been miscast in for far too long. Finally, at the desk, I retrieved another piece of paper from my bag. The pen felt cool, solid between my fingers. My handwriting, for once, was calm, controlled, no second guessing. I wrote, "To whoever still thinks I'm their project, I decline the role. This performance is over. No dramatics, no more pleading. Just a closing line to a show I never auditioned for." I folded the note and slid it beneath the original letter, along with two relics of my real life, the ultrasound photo, curled at the edges from being held too often, and my husband's wedding ring, still warm from resting in my palm overnight. Then, a flutter. A small, insistent kick from inside me. I pressed a hand gently to the curve of my stomach. "We're doing this our way," I whispered. "Not theirs. Ours." I dressed slowly, with intention. Each item I chose had a purpose, nothing more. From the suitcase I had packed 3 days ago, hidden at the back of my closet, prepared in silence, I took only what mattered. Essentials, a scarf for the cold, my phone, a bottle of water, travel documents, and a small cloth pouch with handwritten notes I hadn't had the heart to burn. Not yet. I zipped it closed with a firm tug. It didn't feel like running away. It felt like coming back to myself. As I stepped into the hallway, I heard the soft click of heels. Callista. She stood in the living room, perched on the edge of a white leather armchair like a cat ready to pounce. Her lipstick was sharp, her hair perfect. Her phone glowed in her hand, likely mid-scroll through some curated feed of perfect lives. She looked up, eyes narrowed. "Running away again?" she said, voice laced with sugar and venom. I stopped, mid-step, but I didn't turn to face her. My voice was steady. "No," I said. "I'm leaving the stage." That hung in the air longer than I expected. She opened her mouth to reply, but nothing came. Her face twitched, but no sound followed. In that silence, I walked on. At the door, I didn't look back. No slamming, no final dramatic glance over the shoulder. Just a soft click as I closed it. A seal. Outside, Oregon's autumn air met me like a tonic, cool, brisk, cleansing. The earth was damp from rain the night before, and the scent of pine drifted down from the ridge. My lungs drank in the clarity. Across the yard, Lumen stood by her car, clutching her phone like it held every answer she'd never spoken. When our eyes met, she gave a small wave, uncertain but sincere, and I smiled. Not the polite, pressed smile I'd worn like armor the past few days. A real one, small, but true. With each step toward my car, I felt the ground rise to meet me, not reject me. The gravel beneath my shoes crunched softly, and I realized I was no longer shrinking. I was returning to my full height. I slid into the driver's seat, placed my bag beside me, and took a long breath. The dashboard lights flickered on. My hands gripped the wheel, not with fear, but resolve. As I shifted into gear, my phone buzzed. Caller ID. Aldrich Vale. For a moment, I watched the screen, the name flashing like an echo from a past life. My thumb hovered, then moved away. I let it ring. No message, just silence. I drove. Meanwhile, across town, Eris had already done what I was still learning to do, let go of fear. Her podcast had gone live that morning. Cooking While Pregnant, The Cost of Silence in American Families. It began with a raw clip. My voice, tremulous but firm. This family forced a pregnant woman to cook for 30 people. This is emotional abuse. They are monsters. Then the audio shifted. Recordings, whispers captured from rooms where I had once stood small and obedient. Letters, clips of silences too long and too loud. Eris's voice took over. Her name is Magnus. She walked out, and that was strength. The reaction was immediate. Online comments surged. This woman deserves peace. Stand with Magnus. Her story matters. My story, not buried, not twisted, not erased. I was miles away now, both in distance and in weight. I pulled up outside a small apartment I had quietly rented weeks before, an escape plan I'd made long before I admitted I needed one. The keys sat in the cup holder, cold and certain. I stepped out and carried the suitcase inside. The walls were white. The air smelled like new paint and warm sun. The windows let in a golden slant of morning light. It wasn't grand, it wasn't decorated, but it was mine. I dropped the bag, removed my shoes, and stood in the quiet space. My hand drifted to my stomach again, and I closed my eyes. No voices, no commands, no guilt, just silence. Mine. Let's go home, I whispered, not to the apartment, to myself, to us. And this time, I meant it. The morning didn't scream or demand anything. It whispered. A pale light trickled through soft curtains, spilling across the wooden floor and pale cream walls of the small apartment. The air was still but not heavy, and for the first time in weeks I awoke without dread pressing on my chest. There were no slammed doors, no passive-aggressive sighs from across the hallway, no tension thick in the air, just stillness, peace. I blinked slowly and let myself adjust. In the corner of the room, the bassinet sat ready, assembled with care and quiet hope. On the windowsill, a modest stack of books waited, their spines turned toward me like familiar friends. This was not a grand home, but it was mine. It was sanctuary. I swung my legs out of bed, and the soft carpet welcomed my feet like an old comfort I didn't know I missed. The faint scent of coffee drifted through the open window. Somewhere outside, birds chirped a gentle morning chorus. Life was continuing, same as always. But now, I was finally a part of it, not just surviving it. In the small kitchenette, I filled the kettle with cool water and placed it on the stove. As the flame caught, I stood there in silence, watching the water begin to move, to dance in tiny ripples. When it began to hiss and hum, I reached for a tin of loose tea, one I had bought for myself, not chosen for someone else's taste. I poured the water, letting the steam rise and curl around me like a morning prayer. A simple moment, a small ritual, but it felt sacred. Sipping my tea, I sat on the edge of the couch and opened my phone. A flood of unread emails greeted me, coupons, newsletters, shipping updates. But one subject line froze me. From Aldrich. Subject: I'm sorry. I stared at it for a moment, breath caught somewhere between my ribs and my throat. With trembling fingers, I tapped it open. I failed to protect you. I'm sorry. I'll be here if you ever want to talk. No paragraphs. No explanations. No manipulation. Just a quiet apology. For a few seconds, I considered replying. My fingers danced over the keyboard. I forgive you. Then, we need to talk. But nothing felt right. Not yet. Instead, I archived the message. Not deleted, not ignored. Just placed somewhere safe, like a sealed box on a shelf. I could return to it, or not. That choice was mine now. I glanced around the apartment. The silence wasn't cold or empty. It was gentle. It wrapped around me like a shawl, a different kind of quiet from what I had known before. I picked up my phone and texted Lumen. Thanks for holding space yesterday. Her reply came quickly, as it always did. Always. Mom's been quiet, avoiding everyone. I smiled, not unkindly, and typed back. Let her sit with it. In these past few weeks, I'd learned how to reclaim time. I slept. Deeply. Fully. I ate without guilt, without someone commenting on what I should or shouldn't have. My body began to feel like mine again. I started healing, not just physically, but in ways I couldn't even name. But healing didn't mean forgetting. The wounds may have closed, but they left faint scars, lines only I could see, but ones that told the story of where I'd been. I opened the podcast app and saw that Eris had uploaded a new episode. I had been avoiding it, unsure if I was ready to hear my story filtered through someone else's voice. But today, I pressed play. Her voice, low and steady, filled the room. This isn't just about one woman cooking for 30 people while 8 months pregnant. It's about a system of silence, about how women, daughters, wives are conditioned to endure, to serve, to disappear. But Magnus didn't disappear. She walked away. And that moment, that was the beginning of something. I froze. My hand, still holding the mug, trembled just slightly. Eris continued, her tone full of quiet fire. Since that episode aired, I've received over 200 messages from women sharing their own stories. Stories of being overlooked, dismissed, used. They thought they were alone. They're not anymore. She began playing voice clips, anonymized messages from strangers, voices filled with pain, resilience, defiance. My mother made me cancel college to help raise my brother's kids. I was told I was selfish for choosing my career over family chores. I didn't know anyone would understand. Thank you. Tears welled in my eyes, but they didn't sting. They flowed easily, softly, like a release. I leaned back into the couch, pulled a blanket over my knees, and rested one hand on my belly. At that exact moment, the baby kicked, sharp, strong, undeniable. I laughed through my tears. I felt that, I whispered. We were here, we were safe, and we were going to do this differently. No more silence. No more dimmed light. The afternoon sun filtered into the apartment, warming the walls. I reached out and turned off the lamp next to me. The artificial light dimmed, but the natural light remained, persistent and strong. I sat up straighter. I saw it clearly now. They had tried to snuff me out. They had boxed me in, drained me, worn me down. But the truth was, the light never went out. It had been there all along, waiting for me to open the curtains. Sometimes the people we expect to protect us are the ones who hurt us most. Not with fists, but with silence, expectations, and the quiet erosion of who we are. This story isn't just about one woman standing up. It's about how dignity is reclaimed when someone decides, I'm not doing this anymore. What would you do if your family saw your worth only when you served them? Have you ever felt like walking away was the only way to be seen? If this story spoke to something inside you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. More true family stories, raw, real, and full of heart, are coming soon.